else know you're experiencing. But at the same time, if you can get some help, and I've been doing this a long time, I have a lot of really great credentials. I'm not going to bore you with that, but I've worked with some of the leading thinkers in the world on emotional intelligence, and I'm good at this, and I'm good at helping people, and I really enjoy it. And so if you want to call in and I can help you in a way that I can demonstrate how this idea of thinking about what you are feeling and then what would be ideal to feel and help you to get from what you are feeling to what would be ideal to feel. If I can demonstrate how that works, I'm going to help everybody who's listening. That's the reason for doing it live. I want to help everybody who's listening by helping you. So if you got something that's going on that you are concerned about, whether, again, it's something in your home life, maybe you're a parent with a child and you're not happy with the way things are going at school, or you're uncomfortable with a teenager and some of the things that might be happening in that young person's life, or you're challenged by a situation in your own relationship with a partner, or you've got something going on at work with a person you report to, or people that report to you, or peers of yours, or people that are team members of yours, whatever it might be, whether it's in your community, in your neighborhood, in a club or a group you belong to, or something in your work life, or something at home, feel free to give me a call and talk about it. And you don't have to give me your real name. I just want some name to call you so I have some way to address you. Because it's not important to me what your name is. What's important to me is that if I can, I want to help you. And the way to get that help is to call the number you see on your screen. And I can give you that number. I'll give it to you, and I'll say it a couple of times in case somebody does want to call. The number's 402-225-0781. So if you're calling from a landline, you put a 1 in front of that. If you're calling from your cell phone, 402-225-0781. And once you call that number, you'll be asked for a PIN. I'll give you the number again, and then I'll give you the PIN. 402-225-0781. The PIN is 882-041-574 #. PIN is 882-041-574 and the #. So if you see it on the screen, you can just call me at any time while I'm on the air. I'm on the air from 5 p.m. to 5:45 p.m. Now, I haven't gotten any phone calls yet, and so I'm going to talk to you about the topics I'm going to cover. Now, I always come in with something I'm prepared to talk about because I know that it's hard to reach for that phone and dial a number and talk to somebody that you may never have met me. And if you have met me, maybe it's even a little more uncomfortable to call me and tell me about what's going on in your life that you're struggling with. Although I've had friends and neighbors and others who have asked for my help at different points in time for different reasons. I'm glad to do it. It gives me great pleasure when I can be helpful to somebody. And I've discovered this concept of an emotion roadmap that really helps people deal with emotionally challenging situations in their life. And I want to talk today about 3 situations I think that are important. One is caretaking. Some of you are in the process right now of having to care for somebody in your family, a friend, maybe a neighbor. Maybe you're a caregiver by profession. But a lot of us aren't caregivers by profession, and yet we're impacted by someone in our life who was fully independent maybe at one time and isn't anymore, and continues to lose more and more of his or her of their independence. Now, it's also possible that somebody was born with special needs and they've been dependent from day one and you've been caring for them forever. And so you're kind of used to it. Doesn't mean it's easy, but you kind of have developed a routine that hopefully works for you. But for many of us who are facing caregiving for the first time, because we have aging parents or we have children who are in some accident and they can't do for themselves, or a spouse who's got an illness, a progressive illness, a disease of some kind. Caregiving is an incredibly emotionally challenging event, and it's ongoing, and it doesn't necessarily get better. Now, one of the things I'll share from my own personal life is that a member of my family has essential tremor, and we've been dealing with that, and trying to help with that from my standpoint is something I'm managing. It's not terrible in our circumstance, but for some, it is really, really hard. The people who have essential tremor, if you've never heard of it, it's a movement disorder disease. And it affects your ability sometimes to lift your hand up with a fork or a spoon so that you can eat. It may cause your hands to tremble. It may cause your head to shake. It may be hard. It may be impacting your vocal cords. There's a lot of things, and you can look up essential tremor to see what it's about. I don't want to be describing it very much because I'm not an expert in the disease. I just know that it just requires more care. As many diseases that show up in our lives that are progressive require more care, we don't necessarily know a lot about why they're happening, why it's happening, or what every symptom is. And we may think we know and not get that right, but what we need to get right is emotionally, how do we support the person that's in our lives that needs us to be an effective caretaker or caregiver? And by the way, that doesn't mean we're on call all the time. There are times when it's time to call in a professional. There's times when it's really important that you get a break from siblings, from other family members, perhaps from friends. But I was asked at one point, because I do have expertise in this field of emotional intelligence, to write a description of what it's like to deal with someone who has a progressive disease, like essential tremor. At the time, what I wrote was, when I think about it from an emotional vantage point, I think what it requires is radical compassion. Now, I'm not a radical person particularly, but in this case, I think you really have to take a deep dive into, what you mean when you say, I'm going to be helpful and care for you and compassionate and concerned, and I'm going to do what I can to make this work for you, for us, in any way that I can. And you have to remind yourself about this. I had to remind myself about this, that's the commitment I'm making. And yet, how do you do this? And what's the best way to do this? Well, it turns out that some of the people involved with this nature of caregiving with progressive diseases had a talk one time, made a presentation at an organization in Connecticut that brings people together who have this disease and is supported by a neurologist who's an excellent neurologist, well known in the field of movement disorders. And he specializes in essential tremor, and he is a part of this, and so is the person who is running these support groups across the state of Connecticut, has brought together lots of people to hear from different speakers. And one day at a meeting I was at, in support, I heard this woman speak from Yale University. Her name is Joan Monin, and she spoke about what it takes to be a caregiver. And that's her expertise. Her field of expertise specializes in caregiving, particularly as it relates to dementia, but also other progressive diseases. And she was sharing what she had learned. By the way, she's developed, I guess, I've not seen it, but people are saying it's an incredible guide to all the resources that are out there. If you happen to have somebody in your family who's impacted by dementia, you may want to try and get a hold of that guide. But the idea of trying to do more with emotions and use my emotion roadmap really appealed to Joan when I went up and spoke to her after I heard her speak. And so together with Yale professor Joan Monin and some other colleagues of hers at Yale, we are right now in the process of submitting a grant, and we'll probably do some work with or without the grant in trying to discover through experimental research whether or not this concept of an emotion roadmap that I've created can help people who are in a caregiving and caretaking role. And I'm excited about this. I'm excited about this because the group that we're working with is the International Organization for Essential Tremor across the world. And if we can demonstrate that we have real results from this emotion roadmap that I've created again and have worked with now since the late 1990s, and in my own anecdotal experience with lots and lots of people that I've worked with, both in companies, in schools, in universities, in government, in military, as well as in their personal lives, I've done a tremendous amount of work where I've seen real gains, real value, real changes in people's lives for the better. And that's incredibly satisfying to me. And so my goal is to see whether or not what I've learned and this expertise that I've developed over time can make a difference throughout the world for any individual anywhere on the planet who is facing this idea of changing how they relate to some of the people in their lives that are closest to them because of the need for caregiving. And also for the people that are impacted themselves emotionally, losing your independence. It's one of the toughest things, I think, to experience in life. So helping them deal with their need to be able to ask for help and understand it's okay to ask for help, consistently ask for help, even when you can't do much in return. Just being there, just being in the room, just being alive, just being with someone, for me, is the way I think about radical compassion. You don't have to do anything for me. I'm just so happy I'm here with you. So trying to think like that, that's kind of the thing I'm talking about. So one of the things that you may want to think about is as you're listening to this show and you're learning, and hopefully, again, if I get callers, and I'll give you the number again, if you got something you want to talk about and you're in that role, and I can sort of demonstrate a little bit about how to think about that, because there are different ways to deal with emotions. I've discovered several, and all of them work at different times. And then there are times when nothing works. I get that. But if I can give you some tools, if I can give you some power tools, if you will, to deal with your emotions better, perhaps, than you've dealt with them before. This doesn't just relate to caretaking and caregiving. It relates to every aspect of our lives because emotions are in everything. Just a short anecdote. Our granddaughter, Hannah, won her geography bee. She, in her school, the top 4th and 5th graders competed to be in a geography bee. There were 10 contestants, and she was the only girl. And she won. She won. She answered some tough questions that many of the adults, including myself in the room, wouldn't have had the answers for. She's a really bright girl. And so I asked her, I said, Hannah, would you like to be on my talk show, my live stream, and talk about what it feels, to how much you prepared for it and how confident you felt going in and how nervous you might have felt at different times and how it felt when it got down to just 4 of you and then 2 of you and what was going on emotionally. I thought it'd be a fun show to have and fun to have her on. And when I asked my daughter whether or not our granddaughter, would feel okay doing that, she said, no. I asked her. She wasn't willing. But wouldn't it be interesting just to hear from somebody? I know it's hard to talk about emotions and how we feel emotionally. But, sometimes so many other people benefit from understanding what somebody went through in order to get to the point of being a winner. It isn't all just bubbly and confidence exuding all the time. There's a lot of preparation. There's a bunch of anxiety that goes into winning and preparing. And then there's the joy, the excellence, the thrill of going out there and performing at the highest level. Whether you're an Olympic skater or you won a geography bee or you did something special in your life where you excelled and you won something. And sometimes it doesn't have to be competition against others, by the way. I think winning is about being better each day, trying to find ways to help yourself to grow, to achieve certain things that are important to you, not necessarily to others. So I did want to talk about caretaking. Let me give you the number. In case you're in that spot, I can talk more about this if you have a question or two about caretaking or caregiving or you may be someone who is in the place where you're the one losing your independence and how it feels for you. The number to call is 402 225 0781. 402 225 0781. And again, you can see this, right? You can see this on your screen if you're watching. And then the PIN 882 041 574 and the pound sign. 882 041 574 and the pound sign. Now I'm guessing for any of you that might be listening that you probably have somebody or something in your life that revolves around caretaking or caregiving. But maybe it's not something that's pressing for you. I get that. But if it is, this is a chance to call in and ask about that. And you can probably find out more by staying connected with me if you want to connect via LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Charles Wolfe, WOLFE, on LinkedIn. My own YouTube channel, if you're on YouTube and you're looking on Simsbury Media, you can find my YouTube channel where I post a lot of things I think that are worth sharing and knowing about. Type the @ sign and then my initials C for Charles, J for James, and then my name, WOLFE, and the number 5. CJWOLFE 5. And you can find me and find lots of things on that channel. Okay, so the second topic I want to talk about today, I think you might find of interest, especially if you have someone in your life that has special needs. I was reading an article in the Boston Globe. I tend to get a bunch of newspapers online these days. I get the Boston Globe, I get the Boston Herald, I get the Wall Street Journal, I get the New York Times. Those tend to be conservative, the Journal and the Herald, liberal, the Globe and the Times. But in any case, I just look to see what I might be interested in reading about. And in today's edition of the Boston Globe, there was an article about the number of teachers, special education teachers, leaving the field in the state of Massachusetts. And in special education, I know about this in part because many years ago, a long time ago, I actually worked really closely with special education department teachers because I was a guidance counselor in what was junior high school at the time, but 7th and 8th grade, and then later on in K through 6, kindergarten through 6th grade. And so I worked a lot with teachers and often with special education students that needed help in special ways. And I'm in touch with the field for other reasons today as well. One of the things that I can tell you about the field is that as I read about the reasons people are leaving, I think many people that have kids with special education needs have heard all these things, or at least many of them. But I'll share them for the rest of you who may not know. One is that there are mandates for special education teachers sometimes to do extremely close work with some students that have heightened needs. And the school system can't really afford to send them out to get special help. And so oftentimes it requires one-on-one time for that special education teacher and that student to be together. A fair amount during the school day sometimes. And yet the special education teacher often has a caseload. It can range. It can be anywhere from 10 to 30, depending on the school system, with the average probably being somewhere between 15 and 22, somewhere in that framework probably fits most districts. But some of the things that are happening is that school systems, for whatever reasons, many of which you're all familiar with, are having to cut budgets. And budget cutting sometimes involves the need to cut special education teachers. And so the caseload for those that remain goes up. The problem with special education, in part, is also the demands are great that have come from the state, all with good intentions, I believe, but not with the money to fund the needed staff to make it all happen. So many special education teachers are caught up with ongoing testing that takes place many, many hours during the course of the school year, which takes away from the time the teacher has to actually be teaching and helping the children that she's assigned or he is assigned to work with. So that's a challenge. There's also the challenge of the parent. Some parents are extremely involved, and that's great, except if they're too involved. And I don't mean anybody should ever feel too involved, except when they keep demanding meeting after meeting after meeting, when in fact the child's doing well. Because as I understand it, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but I think if you ask for a meeting, the school's required to have one if your child is designated as having special needs. Even when things are going well and everything that you had planned for was working the way you had hoped. So you want to be thoughtful about that. But then there's also the families that aren't involved, aren't supportive, or can't be because of their own circumstances. Lots of reasons why people can't find the time to be more supportive. There's lots of things that impact on these teachers. And I want to say, I think the world of people that want to go into this field, I think it's wonderful for wanting to care for children, for supporting and cheering for any small success, for helping these kids live a life that feels full and meaningful and that they can be proud of themselves even when school is extremely challenging at levels that most kids don't experience. So those who go into this field, I have tremendous respect and want to applaud them really, for what they do. But it's so challenging at times, and if you don't have a school administrator or a special education supervisor who is in your corner and is supportive of you and helps you to get the job done, that makes it even tougher. Now, anybody in any field knows that if you have a great supervisor versus one that's average versus one that's poor, there's a huge difference in what you're experiencing. So that's part of the issue. But what do you do about it? Now, as I was reading through the Globe and the article, I decided to read the comments just to see what the comments would say. Now, again, the Globe is a very liberal newspaper, and so the readers of the Globe tend to be people that, for whatever reason, don't like Donald Trump. And so in the comments, as you might expect, there's a lot of, if Trump hadn't started the war, if he used the money, if we taxed the billionaires, could we just give more money? So there's that angle. And then there's the very conservative angle, which is, again, this is just the political buzz for the liberals for the conservatives is, if we didn't let in, the tens of millions of people illegally into this country, we wouldn't be having these problems. So the interesting thing to me is that special education has been struggling for years, long before we had the people who flooded the borders in the last several years, and long before the Iranian war started, right? So I don't think it's helpful to go down that road, whatever side of the political spectrum you're on. But what I do think is helpful is, and this, I just wanted to share this, and if you have some thoughts about it, share what you think might work. I think that there's, first of all, I think there's billionaires out there looking for things to do with their money. People like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Bill Ackman on the conservative side. Gates and Buffett tend to be more liberal. I don't think it matters where you're coming from. I think everybody wants the schools and kids in schools to do well. So there's a resource there, I think, that could be tapped. But to do what? And here's what I think would work. And I'd be curious to hear if you wanted to call in and share what your thoughts might be. But one of the things that I thought about was, in my world, when I'm trying to find ways that are going to fix something that isn't working in a certain area or some kind of company or school or wherever it is I happen to be working at the time, I'm looking at people and I'm asking them, hey, is there some place where this is working? Are there any schools where special education teachers and administrators, parents and community and kids, it's all working at least better than most other places? In other words, are there best practices out there someplace? And there often are. And so I thought one of the ways that we might start on something like this is to look at the idea that, hey, everywhere we're not feeling. It isn't everywhere that this is happening, that teachers are leaving every school system. There might be some school systems where people that leave one place are going to. They're going to another that's more successful and they feel more support. What's going on in those systems? And I think that I would look to see where the success was happening, and I'd look at the administrators that people all felt, hey, this is partly why success is happening here. These administrators, they figured out how to be supportive, how to work with the people above them, how to manage a budget that's tough, and also to be supportive of the people that are in the roles of special education teachers, actually. So let's gather together some of the best administrators. Could be from different states, but let's just say you stay in one state, and also because then certain states have different rules, so it's probably best to stay within your state. Take your best administrators from different districts. Try to be diverse in where you pick from. Pick from the places where it's very urban, some very rural, some very wealthy, some not so wealthy. Try to get different districts where there is success happening. Bring those people together and talk about what are best practices and why are they happening in certain districts. Not why aren't they happening in other places, but what makes them work where they're working. And bring in somebody from McKinsey, bring in somebody from the Boston Consulting Group, bring in some great project manager. Have the company offer up, have that be a charitable contribution on their part to bring in some of their best project managers, people that know how to look at an issue. Look at all the variables impacting that issue. Look at best practices. Identify root causes of problems. And then start with creating a series of pilots to try in different places in different ways and measure that success. Assign great project managers from some of these companies that have an invested interest. Maybe they have kids themselves with special needs. Put them in charge and have them lead the projects to come up with ways and ideas to actually try to pilot successful ventures that make everybody feel like this is better. It may not be perfect, but it's better, and we're on our way to really successful iterations or ideas. This is how it works in corporate life. And then have somebody like Gates or Ackman from the conservative side, or Buffett, somebody with billions of dollars looking for some legacy that they want to leave. Have them fund this. Approach them with the idea that we're looking at best practices. We've got top-notch people that are involved with this, and we need a funding source. Don't tax them. Ask them for it. I think a lot of these people would love to be involved with a project like that. So that's my idea on. And by the way, that would work for lots of different issues, not just this one. But I happen to have a special spot in my heart for people that are dealing with kids with special education needs. So what are your thoughts? Anybody got some ideas themselves about what they've seen work and what they'd like to see happen? Or what they think about my idea? Maybe it's far-fetched. I'm sure it is. But it was what I thought about, and I wanted to share it today. It's nice having a platform, and so I thought I'd share that with you just as a way of thinking about things. If you want to call in about this at all, the number to call is 402-225-0781. And the PIN, once you call the number, again, the number is 402-225-0781. And the PIN's 882-041-574 and the pound sign. Now, before I jump to another topic, which I will if I have to, and I've got about 10 minutes left, I do want to allow you to call. And you don't have to talk about either of the topics I've chosen to share with you today about caretaking, caregiving, being the person cared for, or someone dealing with special education, whether you're a family dealing with it from your children have that need, or you've been in special education yourself perhaps, and you have some thoughts about what your experience was, or you're someone who's a teacher or someone who's an administrator, and you don't necessarily want to go public about who you are, but you have some ideas and thoughts that you'd like to share. Again, you can call in about that. But you might just have something you just want to talk to me about. Now, let me give you a moment to in case there's somebody's listening that would like to just ask about something in their own lives. And 10 minutes is enough time to be helpful to you, I believe. So 402-225-0781. and the PIN 882-041-574 and the pound sign. And I'll wait a bit. Four zero two 225-0781 and the PIN 882-041-574. Okay, so no callers. I will move on to my last topic. By the way, if you see this and the show is something you catch on Simsbury Media later, or you see it on my channel at some other point when I post it, I think one of the things that you might want to do in case you didn't get a chance to call but you'd like to is tune in next Tuesday, because I'm back next Tuesday. Same time, 5 p.m. to 5:45 p.m. So the last topic I want to talk about today is this idea of how do you bring emotional intelligence into your organization? I want to talk about what emotional intelligence is. I think everybody thinks they know what it means to be emotionally intelligent. My guess is you have an opinion about it, even though maybe you've never read anything in particular about it, but just the words themselves sound like they make some sense to you. Usually what people say when I ask them, what do you think emotional intelligence is? It's not being sarcastic. They're being, they're saying that, hey, I guess it means being more intelligent about emotions. And that's true. That's what it does mean. But how does that happen? How does that happen? There's a lot of definitions out there about emotional intelligence. They're sort of aligned in some ways, and in other ways they're quite different. But the way I think about it, in any way, and I'll share that with you, is that the pioneers in emotional intelligence, and I was privileged to work with them, Peter Salovey, who is president emeritus of Yale University. He was the psychology department chairperson at Yale when I first met him, started working with him. But he's since been the president of Yale, and he's a really emotionally intelligent guy, by the way, but he also was the pioneering psychologist along with his colleague and friend Jack Mayer, who's a University of New Hampshire professor of psychology. And if you've been listening to the show for a while, Jack was on the show too. I actually interviewed Jack. If you look at CJ Wolf 5 on YouTube, at CJ Wolf 5, CJWOLFE 5, you will see Jack Mayer in a conversation with me talking about the history of emotional intelligence and our work together. So that's fun. But in any case, emotional intelligence is this idea of being smarter about how you identify how you're feeling and how somebody else is feeling that's important to you for whatever reason. I mean, the obvious place that it might be important is if you're trying to influence somebody. It might be a partner that you live with, might be a business partner. But whoever it is that you're trying to influence, you want them to go along with your idea, which might be different than where they came in and with their idea that's pretty far different from what it is that you want to do next and have their support for. So if I know how the person's feeling, how they're reacting to what I'm saying, and I'm gauging it right, I'm seeing that they're buying what I'm saying, or I'm being very aware that they're not buying what I'm saying, and I need to change tactic or tack, because I can see by how they're feeling, they're not responding well to what I thought would be very important to say to them. Apparently, they're feeling quite differently than what I would have hoped. But if I don't recognize that, I'm still down that path. If you've ever been sold by a salesperson who wants to tell you about, well, I guess a car salesman's a pretty common example, wants to tell you about the big engine, about how fast it goes, how fast you get to 60. And the person who was buying the car is interested, what about the safety features? What about when your eyes close for a second and you go out of the lane? or there's a car coming up and in your blind spot. What about those kind of things? And the person keeps wanting to talk about all the cool stuff on the car because that's what he or she is excited about. And they don't recognize that what they're excited about that might have helped sell the car to the person before the people they're talking to now is not helpful at all to the person they're talking with. So one of the things that you want to think about if you want to bring emotional intelligence into your organization is how can you use the idea of knowing what people are feeling and then thinking about what would I want people to feel if I'm a salesperson or I'm just trying to influence somebody or I'm a leader and I'm about to make a tough decision for the company and I don't want anybody to panic and I certainly don't want my most talented people to leave the company when I announce this change that we're going to be making? How do I get in front of that? How do I get in front of it in a way that says to everybody that's paying attention, this is what we need to do? This isn't arbitrary. This isn't like, hey, I just had a whim when I woke up this morning and I decided we're going in this direction instead of the direction we've been going for the last several years. No, this has been well thought out. This is based on our business circumstance, on our competitors, on the current product line, on the needs that we have to stay as a thriving institution or organization. It can be nonprofit. It doesn't have to be a profit. This is for anybody, any organization, any group that's working together. How do we introduce change in a way that's supportive and constructive and gets people to buy in, as opposed to causes great fear and panic and causes them, if they can, to leave? So that's part of being thoughtful about how you bring emotional intelligence in. And understanding what you want them to feel is just the beginning. Because once you understand what people might feel or are feeling right now, that maybe we're not on a good track and we're headed in a very bad direction, and that maybe hope springs eternal with the message you want to give. How do you give it in a way that it does feel hopeful and not just terrified? How do you do that in a way that communicates what you want people to feel in a way that causes those feelings to happen? So that's partly how you be smart about what you do organizationally. I can tell you more about that when I come back next week. I'm getting close to the close time here. So I do want to say that I hope you've enjoyed listening. I hope some of what I said to you resonated. About caretaking, about kids with special needs. I think one thing I'd like to leave you with around if you happen to have a child with special needs is constantly be supportive. If you think about going to work every day or going anywhere every day where you're on the low end of the ability of most people in the same place that you're going every day, it isn't easy to keep your self-concept up. But if you reward your child, your family member, your brother, your sister, by being supportive and saying how proud you are for any success, how encouraging you are when they keep trying and aren't successful, and then having a celebration when they do reach a milestone. It may not be the milestone that other kids would celebrate, but it's a milestone for them, and you take the time and you make the effort and you celebrate the successful accomplishment and you celebrate them. That's an important message I want to leave people with about kids with special needs. But it's true for all of us, really. In some ways, we're all special in terms of we have unique needs, every one of us. When people talk about norms that are normal, there's a wide variation. And while at times I might look normal to all of you, at times I don't or won't. And the same with each of you. We all are unique in certain ways. Some wonderful, some not so great. So be as supportive as you can of all of those people in your life that you care about. I'd like to leave that message with you. I was thinking of wearing my Winnie the Pooh sweatshirt, which is has a picture of Winnie the Pooh looking at his reflection in the water. He's got a big smile on his face, and the text underneath says, "Smile, and the world smiles back at you." So I leave you with that. I hope it's a good message for you, and I want to let you know that it's time to close, so I'm going to say goodbye. And again, I'll be back on the air with you on Wednesday. at 5 p. Excuse me, next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I hope you can join me then. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.